There's no beat writers or anything like that.
There's nothing, which is great. It reminds me of the WNBA days where I would stalk these girls' Instagram pages to see if they were like in like a cast or something like that, to see if they were going to play that night. And we're going to be doing all that digging for you. Hello and welcome to episode 361 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan. As always, joined by the big dog himself, Evan Silva. And today we are here to celebrate a very momentous occasion here at ETR. We love spring football. We love minor league football. We love to sweat borderline NFL players. For this glorious celebration of these things, we are joined by our newly crowned director of niche sports. It is, of course, the legend himself, Cody Main. Cody has been having no sex and researching USFL for the past month. How's it going, buddy?
No sex for a variety of reasons, for the mandatory ETR vasectomy that we all have to go through through the onboarding process. But the last time we talked, we were talking the pinnacle of football during the Super Bowl. I think this product is going to be just as good. So I'm very excited for USFL DFS, which we will have very soon.
Yes, Cody's, of course, referring to the showdown slate of the Super Bowl, which was awesome. Evan, about 5 days away from actual football being played again. How's it going?
It's going well. It's good to finally first show with Cody. I haven't done a show with Cody yet, and I'm excited to just pick his brain. I feel all right about where I am in terms of USFL knowledge. I've been cramming for the last few days. Have a good idea of familiar with pretty much all the coaches, maybe half of the rosters. Mm-hmm. There are some guys legit on here I have not heard of. But there are a bunch of guys that had little cups of coffee in the NFL, or I remember them from college. And I think on this show, we're going to focus on what are the strategies going to be for each team offensively, and maybe highlight some skill position players, maybe some stacks. You go back to the XFL, there were some stacks that were just hitting, and if we can find some of that chemistry. And there are some particular teams and some quarterback wide receiver situations where they've played together in the past, in the spring league, in college, where they played for this particular coach and they're being paired back up again. If we can identify those early in the season, I think that we can get an edge on our opponents.
Yeah. Evan, of course, referring to the shower narrative USFL style. On today's show, as we've alluded to, we are going to get you ready for USFL season rules, structure, players, coaches, expectations. And by the way, I just want to say this off the top. The football is going to be bad, man. And I've talked about this in the solo pod before. There are not enough good quarterbacks to go around in the NFL, let alone backup NFL, let alone third string NFL, let alone these minor league football teams. When you have bad quarterback play and very little time to prepare, as these teams have had, it's going to be bad football. That does not mean we cannot win money playing DFS. We cannot win money betting on the USFL, because I don't care. You guys know me. I barely even care about football. I am here to win and to win money. And so nothing is better than betting on football and playing DFS for football. So I don't want to hear any complaining about the quality of play. Anyways, before we get into it, I want to remind everyone this show is brought to you by, you guessed it, the Establish the Run USFL product. Product is live right now. Price is just $119 for the entire season. We will have projections and ownership up for every player, top plays, a live show, continuously updating depth charts, Cody's favorite bets, showdown coverage, and more. Go to the subscribe page on EstablishTheRun.com for details. Also, I would just say, quickly, you're absolutely insane if you don't take advantage of that MGM deal that we worked out. I've talked about it a ton of times, but basically, if you sign up for MGM, a brand new account, bet at least $10, you get a free $85 that you can use for anything in ETR, including your USFL sub, and they'll give you $1K in free bets on top of it. Just make sure you follow the instructions, use our link, and it is a new account. All right. Let's first talk structure and rules here. Quickly, at the highest level, there's 8 teams. They all have team names, which I'm not really sure why. They all are from Philadelphia, New Jersey, or whatever, but it doesn't matter because every game is being played in Birmingham, Alabama. The regular season is 10 weeks. Then there will be a semifinal and a championship game. Rules, though, Cody. Is there anything that people need to know about rules versus the NFL? Differences between USFL rules and NFL rules?
Yeah, just quickly, I think the rules are fun to talk about, but I don't think they're going to be heavily utilized by the coaches in this league, as we have seen in previous versions of this league, mainly in the XFL. But they did do the 3-point try that the XFL attempted, and I don't think we saw too many of those 3-point attempts. Essentially, what that rule is, you have an option to go from the 2, the 5, or the 10-yard line, and with respectively 1, 2, and 3 points earned for each try. It's fun to talk about. It's a cool talking point. I just don't think it's going to be highly utilized. I think we still see a lot of 1 point, extra point kick attempts. The other one that's interesting is the onside kick alternative. It's something that I know has been talked about at the NFL level as well, but teams get the option of converting a 4th and 12 play from the 33-yard line. If they convert, they keep possession of the ball. If not, the opposing team gets the ball where they are down. Again, probably not going to be heavily utilized by these coaches in this league. The one thing that they are attempting to carry over from the XFL is speeding up the clock and trying to increase play at the end of the second half and fourth quarter. So you will see the clock stop in the final 2 minutes of the second and fourth quarters. We didn't see that really lead to many more plays in the XFL or the AAF. So again, these rules are fun, and I think it has a bigger impact on what the books think. The books think that games are going to shoot out. They're going to be high pace, fast, up tempo. But I don't think we're going to see that play out.
No way. I mean, look at these coaches, this roster of coaches throughout the league. Like these are guys who, like, the game passed them by with very few exceptions. That's the reason that they're coaching at this level, is because their time just kind of expired in the NFL. And
I mean, well, to their credit too, the quarterback play in this league is going to be so bad. I actually don't blame them for establishing the shit out of it. You know what I mean? Like, and we'll
come
get
on.
to it.
Now you're going over to the other side.
Well, I'm going to give a little rant on the books here in a second here. But yeah, I think the last 2 minutes of the first half, last 2 minutes of the game, that rule is interesting. In other words, if you get a first down, somebody goes down in the field of play, they are going to stop the clock. But as we saw in the XFL, and we've been doing a lot of work beyond the scene to figure out how many plays are going to be run in this game. In other minor leagues, that rule has not really affected the number of plays per game. DraftKings has confirmed to us, shout out to them, they have confirmed to us they will be offering DFS on the USFL. The structure that they are going to is going to be quarterback, running back, 2 wide receiver / tight end spots, 2 flex spots, and 1 defense. In other words, you don't have to play 1 running back. You don't have to play any tight ends if you don't want to. There's just a ton of positional flexibility that we're going to have. So I think that's something interesting. There's going to be a lot of really wide receiver heavy lineups that you can make for teams that are actually going to want to throw. We'll get to some of those in a second here. Oh, and by the way, with this new structure, our friends at Fantasy Lab do have their optimizer set up for USFL. If you buy our USFL product, you can add on the Labs product, optimizer product, and you get our projections preloaded into your Opto. I mentioned betting. I mean, I don't like to get people fired, man, but whoever put up these lines at Fox, unless it was for marketing, I mean, they're just really bad at their job. They opened the lines for the USFL, the totals, 56, 54, 53, 55. I mean, who did they think was playing? Like Josh Allen against Patrick Mahomes? I mean, it just shows a complete lack of understanding of the league, the caliber, the coaches, the rules. I mean, unbelievable. And now the lines, it took like a day and a half, and now the lines have been bet down 10, 11, 12 points in places, still like around 43, 44. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that you don't see in the NFL or any other major sports. Cody is going to be writing a betting article for us each week, Cody. I mean, obviously, we're not going to get 10-point swings on totals anymore. But yeah, I mean, I still think there's more opportunity here than there is in, any other sport.
Especially in week 1, still with totals out there, 43.5, 44, up to 45.5 in some spots for some of these games. We were talking about it behind the scenes. I don't think I would be surprised if some of these totals came in, some of these actual game totals came in the upper 30s. These teams didn't have much time to prepare. They came into camp. They've got about 2 weeks to install an entire offense. And then we just talked about the coaching staffs that are willing to establish it, maybe rightfully so. And then the quarterback play is going to be subpar at best. So while they're still out there, I think that these totals will come down throughout the season. I'll try and write them up as we go. But again, it's going to be a low scoring league. I think in general, there might be some teams that separate, which we'll talk about. But looking at these totals, 55.5 for some of them that opened up was just absolutely insane.
Evan, I'm curious what you think of the overall talent in the league, not coaches for a second, just the overall talent in the league, because I think the best quarterback in the league is probably either Jordan Ta'amu or Kyle Sloter.
Mm-hmm.
The first overall pick was Shea Patterson. I mean, we're talking about bottom of the barrel guys. What was your reaction to kind of the overall rosters and the talent in the league?
I would compare it to maybe the second week of preseason in the NFL, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a little bit better than like the Hall of Fame game.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously not as good as the third preseason. Well, I'm going way back, like before the pandemic to, the 4-week preseason.
Yeah.
In the third week, a lot of starters play. And in the fourth week, it's straight scrubs that really aren't even, in the running to make an NFL team. Somewhere between the second and fourth preseason game, I would say.
Yeah, and we're going to get to some of these players, even some players that like I knew and I was excited about, like Eli Rogers and Devion Smith, like inexplicably just got like cut. And like I was like, I thought Devion Smith and Eli Rogers were going to be like two of the best plays on the slates, and they didn't even make the team. I mean, and there's like no reporting around it. It's like, oh, what happened to Devion Smith? Like no one knows because it's the freaking USFL, and
there's no beat writers or anything like that.
There's nothing, which is great. It reminds me of the WNBA days where I would stalk these girls' Instagram pages to see if they were like in like a cast or something like that to see if they were going to play that night, and we're going to be doing all that digging for you behind the scenes as well. Oh, I know I'm interrupting the video. Wah. But if you're enjoying this video and want to see more fantasy football and DFS content like it, please just take 2 seconds, hit the subscribe button, hit the thumbs up button. It really does go a long way for us, and we'd appreciate it. Thank you for watching. And now back to the show. All right. I think what we should do here is kind of go team by team. And we'll talk about the coaches for a minute, and then I'll give you each a chance to identify a player that you think could have an impact in DFS. We're going to go in order of Cody's power rankings. In other words, we're going to start with the team Cody thinks is the best right now, and we'll go down to the team Cody thinks is the worst, which means we are going to start with the Tampa Bay Bandits. That is the team Cody thinks right now is the best, coached by Todd Haley. Everybody remembers Todd Haley from his time with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was also the XFL Defenders coach. He is familiar with minor league football. Of course, they do have Jordan Ta'amu, and I think the consensus, Cody, is that Jordan Ta'amu is the best quarterback in the league. I'm not necessarily sold on that. I thought Jordan Ta'amu was fine in the XFL. I didn't think he was like a star. I mean, he was no PJ Walker. Let's put it that way. So what do you think about Todd Haley and the Tampa Bay Bandits?
It does look like on paper that this is going to be one of the league's most potent passing attacks with Todd Haley, with Jordan Ta'amu, given some of the names that we have further down the board. I think that they will have some of the best quarterback play, and I think that they're going to have some of the best play calling as well with Todd Haley. We saw that he was fairly pass heavy with the Steelers in Big Ben's time, 60% clip in 2017 to 2018, comfortable throwing the ball deep. We know that Jordan Ta'amu's time in the XFL with the Battlehawks was more of a kind of a dink and dunk offense, RPO style offense, which I think some of that will carry over here too. But I do think that from the very beginning that this is the team coming into week one that separates as probably the passing attack that we'll be targeting most.
Yeah, Evan, we've talked about Todd Haley playing. We've talked about Ta'amu, how he failed with most outrageous roster at Ole Miss. What do you think about Haley-Ta'amu combo?
Well, if you go back and look at that Ole Miss team, and they had DK Metcalf and AJ Brown and Dawson Knox, and they had another guy. His name escapes me, but he had a cup of coffee with the Tampa Bay Bucks. Like he, got invited to training camp. I mean, they had a ton of NFL talent on that team. Their record wasn't very good, but they did have some really explosive, high-scoring games. I mean, if you look at their points per game average from that Ole Miss team, like they averaged a lot of points. They just weren't a very good team, period. He goes to the XFL. He plays well relatively. They designed an offense for him that was very high percentage, lots of play action, lots of high percentage throws. He can run. I mean, he's one of the best running quarterbacks in the USFL. So, I think in terms of ceiling, he's got to be the number one guy. Todd Haley, he kind of went out with a bad reputation in Cleveland. He clashed with Hugh Jackson, which I can't blame him for that. But if you go back to his time in Pittsburgh, because Bruce Arians had just been pushed out by ownership. Bruce Arians was clashing with ownership. They did this like fake retirement thing. Obviously, he came back really quickly. But Todd Haley was inserted as the Steelers offensive coordinator. He morphed the offense to really help Ben Roethlisberger, to get the ball out of Ben Roethlisberger's hands more quickly, because Ben was taking so many hits. It was obvious that he was slowing down. They really got a number of really good years, more toward the back end of Ben's career, out of Ben, in part because of the way that Todd Haley designed the offense. So I don't think that I think he's probably, I agree with you that he's probably one of the best offensive coaches in this league. And if you look at their receiving roster, Derek Willis was a guy that was drafted at wide receiver. He was drafted by the Browns. He's got size and speed. Jordan Lastly was drafted. John Franklin was not drafted, but he was a guy that was like a priority UDFA. They have Vince Papali's son on the team. Keith Mumphrey played for the Houston Texans. Yeah. Rashard Davis has been in the NFL. So they've got a pretty impressive wide receiver unit. They've got a quarterback that has had success both in the SEC and in another one of these developmental leagues, and they've got maybe the best offensive coach. So I'm with you guys on the optimism regarding Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I think there is a receiving core that's better in the USFL, which we'll get to, but I do think Derek Willis can definitely play. Like from a size speed perspective, Derek Willis can definitely play. The guy that I want to mention is BJ Emmons, who we played in preseason before. I believe he was on the Raiders, and he's like. Cody has here in the notes, and by the way, you can go to the depth charts. Cody's notes are awesome. Former 4-star Alabama recruit was BJ Emmons. And so guys who at least have, some pedigree like that and were able to produce an NFL preseason, I think are interesting for BJ Emmons there. Cody's second ranked team is the New Orleans Breakers, coached by Larry Fedora. See, to me, I think Kyle Sloter has a chance to be better than Jordan Ta'amu, and I'm not sure what kind of offenses they're going to run. I thought Sloter, a.k.a. Sloterhouse, shout out to the Sloterhouse crew, I thought he was legit good in the preseason when he's had opportunities at the NFL level. Cody, what do you think about Sloter and this New Orleans Breakers team?
Yeah, high level with the Breakers. It'll be interesting to see how Fedora's offense carries over from college to this developmental league, but he joked in a recent interview on RJ Young's Fox podcast that he hasn't been in a huddle since 1996, so he didn't even know how to develop a huddle. So I think we can expect a lot of up-tempo, a lot of fast pace with this offense as well. And at the college ranks, we know that college offenses are more likely to run with poor quarterback play, but he was above average in terms of pass rate at the college ranks. I would expect that to translate pretty well here with Sloter, who he is probably the best real life quarterback in this league. I don't know so much about the fantasy upside because he doesn't have that rushing ability. I don't think he's going to take off too much. But as you mentioned, we know that we played this guy a lot in preseason, completed 74% of his passes over a pretty solid sample, 1,200 yards, 11-to-1 TD to interception ratio. I agree with you that he's the best real life quarterback. And I think that is going to help us in finding wide receivers that he's able to support because he's going to complete a lot of passes and this offense is going to throw quite a bit.
That's what I wanted to go to with Evan. This is my favorite wide receiver core because I actually know these guys. I know Taywan Taylor. I know Chad Williams. Sean Poindexter had a chance in the NFL, I think, as well. What sticks out to you about this Breakers roster, Evan?
Yeah, Sean Poindexter, when we're talking about players that could be really propped up in terms of wide receiver quarterback stacks, Sean Poindexter, he has like a trump card, like his size. And in a league like this where there's a limited amount of talent, the NFL is pulling all the big corners. There's probably going to be a lot of small corners who run 4.6 in this league. Sean Poindexter at 6'5", 230. I mean, he really stands out. And I'm with you on this because Taywan Taylor and Chad Williams, those guys were both drafted in the NFL. Taywan Taylor was a third-round pick. I think Chad Williams was a second or third-round pick.
Dude, people love Taywan Taylor coming out.
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, he had some nice moments in the NFL, but he just kind of flamed out. He got moved around from the Titans to the Browns, and fell down the depth chart, and now here he is. I remember I was in a Dynasty rookie draft when Kenny Golladay and Chad Williams came out, and I was on the board in the middle of the second round thinking, should I take Chad Williams or Kenny Golladay?
Yeah.
Thank goodness I took Kenny Golladay. But that's kind of how Chad Williams was valued coming out of, I believe he played at Grambling.
Yep, sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was a second or third round pick. So they have like legit NFL talent. I think that TJ Logan is an interesting player because he played for their offensive coordinator. Or no, he played for Larry Fedora at North Carolina. TJ Logan, you remember him from the Arizona Cardinals. He can catch passes.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I'm viewing them right now.
Larry Rose was someone that I played with very disappointing results in the XFL. Like I was not impressed by Larry Rose at all. Would not surprise me at all if they go committee or more to TJ Logan for sure. Let's go to the number 3 team on Cody's power rankings here, which is the Philadelphia team. And Evan, I know you thought that this was at least an interesting team. I don't know why I'm calling them Philadelphia, because it doesn't matter at all. But the Philadelphia Stars, Evan, will be coached by Bart Andrews, who actually I never heard of before. They do have Brian Scott. I think there's like some shower narrative going on here between the coach and quarterback, spring league MVP, and of course the coach of that team was Bart Andrews. Evan, what do you think about the Philadelphia Stars?
Well, this is team shower narrative because they're getting the band back together from the spring league, which I barely even knew existed for the last like 4 or 5 years. But Cody, why don't you explain why this is team shower narrative? I mean, I think that they're an interesting team to like bet on to win it all.
Yeah, and early too, right? Because this team
start fast.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
This team comes in with a ton of continuity, a ton of familiarity. It goes beyond Brian Scott, their quarterback, and Bart Andrews, the head coach, who is a guy that just loves these developmental leagues. Like, I don't think he's a guy like Jeff Fisher who's just been sitting on his couch and is like, I'm bored. I think he truly loves this stuff. He's coached in the UFL. He was the XFL Team 9s coach, which was just a group of a bunch of free agents that were, waiting for the call up. He's been with the CFL. So he's been all over the place before he got this team together for the spring league, and they went out and dominated. Brian Scott dominated while he was there too, was a spring league MVP. In this offense, while I'm starting to hear now from CFL guys that Bart Andrews has been up and down in kind of his play calling approach, I think this team is going to be pass heavy as well. In the year that they won the spring league championship, they were 4-2, were plus 11 in terms of point differential in the season. They still dropped back at a 62.1% clip. So I think we can expect this team to pass quite a bit. And again, starting out of the gates with familiarity amongst the wide receiver core with the quarterback. They brought over 2 running backs from that team and offensive linemen. So when we talk about installing an offense in 2 weeks, like, this team should be ready to go starting with week 1.
One guy that sticks out on the roster to me is Bug Howard. But now that we don't have to play any tight ends at all on DraftKings, maybe it's not as interesting. Evan, anybody you want to highlight on this roster? There's honestly not a lot of guys here that I even recognize their name.
I know, but that's because they've been playing in the spring league and they've been playing together. And so I'm with you. This is probably the least recognizable team for people that have been following the NFL and, Power 5 college football. But because of the familiarity and the continuity and the fact that none of the teams have had a lot of time to prepare, but these guys have all played together before, that makes them all the more intriguing. Bug Howard, weird stuff has been happening with him since he came out of North Carolina. He was really highly regarded. He wound up going undrafted. He's bounced around from between some NFL teams. He had some issue where he didn't report or something on time to Philadelphia, or I don't know what we're going to call them, the Philadelphia Stars. But I mean, he definitely has talent. I would look out for a Donald Parham situation, but it could also be a situation where like he doesn't even play in the first game. I mean, I think that he is an actual like low-level NFL talent, and he should be talented enough to dominate here, but it's just weird stuff has been happening with him. He's never caught on anywhere.
Cody, maybe quickly, we can just take a second here to explain to people how you've been getting information about these guys, or how you've been doing research and finding out about these guys and these teams. Because, I mean, clearly it's not just like out there for the taking.
Right. I think a lot of this and just trying to project these teams comes down to quite a few things. First, I think the biggest part of the process is draft capital. If these guys were drafted first overall at their position on their team, it's probably a good indicator that the team wanted them. Right. So I think we shouldn't discount that at all. And then looking at their ability to earn targets in other leagues. So we're grinding box scores from AAF and XFL and NFL preseason. If they could earn targets or earn attempts at the running back position at other forms of football, I think that matters. And then looking for former connections like we did with the Philadelphia Stars. If you know that these guys played together in previous versions of developmental football, I think that should matter. And then when all else fails, just looking at the athletic profile, like Evan mentioned, with these guys that are just going to be more physically dominant than the opposition that they're playing against, I think we shouldn't discount that either. So, if all else fails, you can't find good information on a guy. If a guy's 6'4", 210, like Derek Willies is, and is going to be running up against a bunch of 5'9", 175 corners, and has the draft capital, and has shown that he can earn targets at, the NFL preseason level and stick around on NFL squads for a while, I think that's a pretty good indicator that, we can trust that guy from a fantasy perspective. But a lot of this is just Googling and getting down the rabbit holes on information sources that you hope you can trust.
All that stuff will be baked into our projections, which will be out Thursday. Let's go to the team who had the first overall pick in the draft. And the face of the league, I guess, the most recognizable name to people listening to this is probably Jeff Fisher. I mean, Jeff Fisher is the coach of the Michigan Panthers. Everybody remembers Jeff Fisher from a very, very long and, infamously mediocre run in the NFL. They used their first overall pick on Shea Patterson. I'm not sure that they thought Shea Patterson was the best quarterback, but Shea Patterson went to Michigan and they're the Michigan Panthers. They're like, we'll just take Shea Patterson. And maybe that's a bad take. I don't know. Well, I don't know what either of you guys thought of Shea Patterson in college or anything else, but Cody, what do you want to say about the Panthers?
Just thinking high level on this team, this is absolutely a team that is going to establish it, and more so just than Jeff Fisher, who is, for all intents and purposes, been out of football for the past 5 or 6 years, probably hasn't been sitting around thinking about how to modernize, an offense. We look at their offensive coordinator and Eric Marty, who is a guy that not many people are going to be familiar with. He was last at Grambling State, and that team went 2-7 in his one season as offensive coordinator, averaged 17.2 points per game, and still managed to run at a 55% clip while losing at an average 10 points per game. So I think that Eric Marty and this Michigan Panthers team is going to play not to lose by a lot. They're going to try and establish it. They drafted 4 tight ends. They've got 3 running backs on the roster.
Only 4 wide receivers.
Yeah, 4 wide receivers. I think that this team just profiles as a team that is going to try and run the ball. And then listening to Jeff Fisher's comments in recent interviews, he's going to utilize Paxton Lynch, who he likens to Josh Allen. He wants to use him as a rusher. So we're not even going to get a full 100% snap rate for someone like Shea Patterson. So I don't know how many of the available options on this team are going to be fantasy viable.
I don't know much. I don't know a ton about Shea Patterson, but I'd be shocked if he's like that much better than Paxton Lynch. Like Paxton Lynch was a first-round NFL quarterback. I get that he sucked, but like I would not shock me at all if they played both quarterbacks. A couple other guys on this roster. Jeff Badet was one of the biggest busts in the entire XFL. Like I torched so much money on Jeff Badet early in the season in the XFL. He is on this team. Lance Lenoir, I believe, was on the Cowboys and maybe the Bills as well. And then they have these tight ends. And I know they only have 4 wide receivers on the roster, but both LaMichael Petway and Joey Magnifico can catch the football. If we actually had to play a tight end, these guys would certainly be in play. But since we don't, we're going to have to take a closer look at it. Evan, any thoughts on Shea Patterson, Paxton Lynch, or anything else with Michigan?
I don't have a whole lot to add to that, but I would say that Lance Lenoir would have been the guy I'd be most optimistic about on this offense if it wasn't Jeff Fisher and this other goofball running the show. I mean, it's going to be a high run rate. It's going to be, maybe dueling quarterbacks. I don't know. I'm going to hold out some optimism for Lance Lenoir just because, he made some plays in the preseason for Dallas, and they liked him for a short time in Dallas. But, he's going to have to dominate target share. He may. But that's what he's going to need to do, I think, because the run rate is going to be high and the passing efficiency, I don't think, is going to be very high.
Speaking of run rate, let's move to the number 5 team in Cody's power rankings. That is the Pittsburgh Maulers. It will be coached by Kirby Wilson. Their quarterback, at least has some pedigree. Kyle Lauletta, I believe, was like a 4th-round pick of the Giants, flamed out from there, but I think the scheme here is going to be a concern for us. What do you think about Kirby Wilson and the Pittsburgh Maulers, Cody?
Yeah, if Eric Marty wasn't a concern, the offensive coordinator here for the Maulers is definitely one. He was last offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach for a D3 college, Juanita College. In the last season that he was there coach, they reached 17 points in just 2 games and still ran at a 53.7% clip. So another team that's likely going to live up to their name in the Maulers. Kirby Wilson was a running backs coach for 29 years before retiring. It just profiles like this is going to be a team that's going to try and play smash mouth, and Kirby is going to be full-blown captain of team establish it, and we're not going to get much pass rate. So a guy like Kyle Lauletta, who I actually like as a real-life quarterback for this league and probably does a pretty good job of completing passes, is just not going to see enough volume. He's going to have to be super efficient. I don't think they're going to drop back a ton, but the running backs here are pretty interesting.
Running backs here, Garrett Groshek. Madre London and Mikey Daniel. Evan, any thoughts on anyone on this Pittsburgh Maulers roster?
Well, I'm not going to pretend that I watched very much Garrett Groshek in college, but I know that he caught a lot of passes, and he played at Wisconsin. And you usually don't see Wisconsin running backs catch very many passes, but they do often have like a designated pass catching running back. It's not Melvin Gordon catching the pass, not Jonathan Taylor. It was Dare Ogunbowale.
Mm-hmm.
It was James White. And it seemed to me like just on paper, again, I did not watch Garrett Groshek in college, but it seems to me just on paper that was his role. And he's a big back too. I mean, he's 5'11", a little over 220. So that to me is interesting on paper. Again, I have no true scouting report on him, but just looking at him, on the computer, he looks pretty intriguing. And it looks like they only have 2 RBs on their roster as well.
Yeah, so Mikey Daniel is officially listed as a fullback, and they're the team that let go Devion Smith, who was the leading rusher of the AAF and the XFL. And so when they let him go, it was kind of an indicator to me that Kirby Wilson trusts Garrett Groshek to be the lead back in this offense. Now this Madre London, who they brought in, comes from the European League of Football, and he rushed for over 2,000 yards there, 1 league MVP, 27 touchdowns. So, I mean, this guy can ball out, and he's got legitimate college pedigree. I think he played at Tennessee. So he's been, competing in SEC backfields before going to these developmental leagues. But I do think going into week 1, I think we should project Garrett Groshek to be the lead back and have a decent little clip of the pass game share too.
Let's go to the number 6 team in Cody's power rankings. That is the Houston Gamblers. Will be coached by Kevin Sumlin. College football fans, of course, remember Kevin Sumlin from his time at Texas A&M. Their quarterback is Clayton Thorson, who has gotten some time for the Eagles in preseason. I may have played him once or twice. He was not good from what I remember.
You probably lost money.
Yeah, I'm sure. Cody, what do you have to say about the Houston Gamblers?
I mean, I want to get a little bit more excited about the Houston Gamblers than I have been to this point. I don't necessarily dislike Kevin Sumlin's, what I think his approach will be to this league. He's always been an up-tempo, spread it out kind of guy, running a play at like every 21, 22 seconds at the college level. I think that'll translate here. I think he'll try and be up-tempo, probably pretty situation neutral in terms of run-pass rate. But you mentioned it with Clayton Thorson. It's pretty tough to get excited about this guy. He wasn't good in his time at Northwestern. He averaged 6.3 yards per attempt and a 3.6 TD rate. And then you alluded to the preseason performance. You definitely lost money playing Clayton Thorson in preseason. He completed 44.9% of his passes, 2 TDs, 3 INTs. This South Division is loaded with, I think, pretty good quarterback room, pretty good talent. And I think Clayton Thorson is towards the bottom of it. As much as I want to get excited about a team named the Gamblers, I'm having a tough time doing it.
One guy that we know, Evan, is Isaiah Zuber. Isaiah Zuber made it on the Patriots. We have him projected as the number 1 wide receiver for Clayton Thorson. Any thoughts on him or anything else on Houston?
Yeah, the question is just, and we see this a lot in the NFL. We don't regard Jared Goff, let's say, as, a high-level NFL quarterback. But if he can just be efficient enough to get the ball to, and target Amon-Ra St. Brown enough, Amon-Ra St. Brown can help us, even though we have, skepticism about the guy throwing him the ball. I'm worried that Clayton Thorson is going to be so bad that we can't even get to that, where he can't even support, 1 or 2 potential options in the passing game. So that's my concern. But yeah, Zuber, I mean, he flashed some in preseason. Teo Redding is a guy that, it's kind of been around. Anthony Ratliff-Williams. This roster is not impressive, though. I mean, they could be really bad. Maybe that will translate to some high volume games for Zuber, though. He's definitely a guy on our radar.
Let's go to the number 7 out of 8 teams. And it is unfortunately for the hometown fans, the Birmingham Stallions, the only home team. Maybe they'll get a little boost here by all the home fans, and I'm sure will be rabid in cheering for the Birmingham Stallions in these games. Will be coached by Skip Holtz. Quarterback is Alex Magoo, who I can't remember if I played Alex Magoo in preseason or if it was in the XFL. I can't remember, but either way, Alex Magoo's been around a little bit for us. Cody, what do you think about Birmingham squad?
Now that we've had a chance to talk through the teams, I think I might be a little bit low on the Birmingham Stallions. I don't dislike what I think Skip Holtz is going to try and do as a head coach here for the Stallions. In his time at Louisiana Tech, he was pass heavy. I do think we'll see a slight pass heavy approach here. McGough, whatever you want to call him, he wasn't terrible in his time with the preseason, and he did enough there. He showed NFL coaching staffs enough to stick around for quite a while. He was drafted in the 7th round by the Seahawks in the 2018 NFL draft and spent the next 3 seasons in the league. So somebody saw something out of him worthwhile enough to keep him around for a little while. He completed 54.5% of his passes in the preseason, a 1-to-1 TD to interception ratio. The talent level in this league is probably, like Evan said, right around that NFL preseason range or a slight step below. But I do think that maybe Skip Holtz's pass first approach will support more pass catchers in this offense than I initially thought.
There's some guys on here that we know, Evan. Victor Bolden was a borderline NFL player. We project him as their wide receiver 1 right now. And Tony Brooks-James actually got time in the regular season, if I remember correctly, for the Falcons. Any thoughts on them? Anything else on the Birmingham Stallions?
No, those are the non-quarterback guys to look at. I think we've kind of said it all here.
All right. The last team the Cody projects to be the stone cold worst team in the USFL is the New Jersey Generals. New Jersey Generals will be coached by Mike Riley. I remember Mike Riley from, I believe it was Oregon State. And then he was also in the XFL with the Dragons. They'll be quarterbacked by Luis Perez, which I don't think they wanted, Cody. Did they have an injury or something happened to their quarterback? They do have Jamon Moore also, who we can talk about in a second. But yeah, something happened at quarterback here for the Generals. Cody, why don't you go ahead on that?
Yeah, and maybe my Nebraska Cornhusker bias is showing here a little bit too, because Mike Riley was the head coach at Nebraska for a while and things went south while he was here. But he hasn't inspired much confidence in his time in the AAF, in the XFL. He's going to be a run-first coach. He's not going to let his quarterbacks drop back quite a bit. And then the reason why they're turning to Luis Perez is because first-round draft pick for them, Ben Holmes, broke his foot or broke his pinky toe or something like that during the first week of camp. So we talk about these teams coming in with very little time to prepare, very little time to install an offense. Then you have an injury at quarterback and you've got one less week to install an offense. And the guy coming in Luis Perez has been around for a while. He's kind of one of these developmental league OGs. He's played for the AAF. He's played in the XFL, and he hasn't been good at really any of these stops, completing right around 55% of his passes. So the receiving room is full of a lot of guys that I'm interested, or a couple guys that I'm interested in, but I just don't know how much confidence a Mike Riley plus Luis Perez led offense can inspire in us.
Jamon Moore.
I remember entering the AAF, like Luis Perez was one of the most hyped players in the AAF. And he started off, he was competent early. He kept getting worse every single game because he just would hold. First of all, he has the slowest feet I've ever seen of any quarterback. I mean, he is the king pocket sloth. And I mean, he can't move at all. And he loves to hold on to the ball. And that is a horrible mix at any level of football. And that's why he hasn't had success in any of these developmental leagues. But yeah, you look up and down, like Mike Weber, was drafted by the Cowboys. Trey Williams has played in a bunch of different leagues and is familiar with Mike Riley. He could get a ton of playing time. Jamon Moore was a 4th-round pick of the Packers out of Missouri. He's like a vertical threat. Darius Shepard played slot receiver. He was like the backup slot receiver for the Packers for a while and got some. I remember he caught a touchdown pass from Aaron Rodgers in a game. Alonzo Moore is a guy that's been around. Nick Truesdell has made some plays in various leagues. Braden Bowman has had a cup of coffee in the NFL. So it's kind of disappointing that we can't have optimism about these skill position players or the non-quarterback skill position players because the quarterback position for this team looks really bad on paper.
Yeah. I mean, Perez was so bad for New York in the XFL. They were just like running the ball like directly into the back of their center on like every play. It was so painful to watch New York play. And I'm sure a lot of this league is going to be painful as well to watch. But like I said before, I don't want to hear it. We're going to get out there. We're going to make some money. All right. We've said it all on the USFL. We'll be tracking this league for the next, 12 weeks or so. Great time to be alive for sure. First game is Saturday with a 1-game showdown slate. And then Sunday will be a 3-game slate. Again, if you have not checked out, subscribe page, check it out. We do have weekly and full season options available. For Cody, for Evan, for producer Luke, I'm Adam. Good luck, everybody.